Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto Was the Perfect Shinobi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Rather than going to the Sandaim's business quarters in the Hokage Tower as usual, the trio proceeded to a modest estate on the Konoha village outskirts, in the hills overlooking the town. Naruto recognized the crest on the wooden gates as that belonging to the Sarutobi lineage. So this was the Hokage's private residence. The blonde had never been to the place, and the old man had always been the one to select the scrolls that he had borrowed in the past. This is a most sensitive issue that I'd rather not discuss where others might overhear. One can never be too cautious. Naruto and Anko shared a look as teacher and student trailed the Sandaime through the iron gates and along the garden path leading into the small wooden home with a red tiled covering, both younger shinobi accepting the Hokage's short explanation. Naruto placed Kubikiri Haucho against an outside column, as it was poor decorum to bring a drawn weapon into a person's home. All the more reason to do so in most circumstances, but Naruto held Sandaime in high regard. The demon vessel had never liked the central administrative complex, and so this more private retreat was quite welcome. An aged steward greeted him at the door. "Ah, Sarutobi-sama. This is most unexpected. You hardly ever come home these days." The third let out a tired sigh. Naruto pitied the man. A person his age should never have to shoulder the burdens that he still bore without complaint. This situation involving the coming invasion had Sarutobi looking haggard and exhausted. The Hokage looked as though he would not hold out much longer at this rate. This was a massive problem in Naruto's perspective, as the Jinchuriki depended upon the old man's protection not a little. Without Sarutobi serving as Hokage, the demonic blonde's position within Konoha would become a precarious one. Perhaps the time to prepare an alternative plan was nearing. Sandaime seemed to notice Naruto's countenance and smiled. "The Hokage's work is never done, it seems. Please show our guests to the sitting room." "Hi, right away. Follow me, please." A narrow hallway led into a dim room deep in the home's interior, inside which entire walls were covered with shelves and cases containing innumerable well-maintained scrolls. An ornate oaken desk sat in one corner, while in the center stood a tall square table surrounded on three sides with leather sitting chairs, and a large matching couch against the remaining edge. The old steward encouraged Naruto and Anko to have a seat and relax whilst the Hokage went away with him to attend to some minor detail. The snake-like Kunoiki plopped down on the leather couch, putting her bare legs up onto Sarutobi's lounge table as she stared at her student through those pupil-less brown serpent's orbs. Naruto didn't dare stop to admire the view but did sit down next to her on the couch rather than taking a seat elsewhere. "Don't look at me like that, kiddo. I got no clue what the old man needs with us." To be more precise, his glance had passed over Anko while he was taking in the room's details. Once called on the issue, he allowed his wandering gaze to rest on the sadistic woman. Not that she was unpleasant to look at, much the opposite. "He said something about the Sakai mission earlier, but that isn't the reason I was." Anko was quick to interrupt him, reaching over to tousle the blonde's spiked hair with a mocking grin. The arm drd around his shoulders and her hand rested against his n. Naruto would typically scorn such contact and pull away, but decided to tolerate it on this occasion. Perhaps this was because he knew that the insane Kunoiki wasn't being serious. Or, then maybe you missed me. You wanted to see your cute sensei, that's all. The demon container bristled somewhat at the insinuation, his response a harsh whisper. "Remind me to never even attempt to be nice to you again. Vindictive B." The woman's grin broadened and turned almost vicious. The blonde turned his head to stare at the wall as he crossed his arms. First Yamanaka earlier and now this mess. Troublesome women needed to leave him the hell alone, and that was that. He despised being teased, and his attitude about it always tended to make those responsible keep at it. This was one principal reason why he liked to be around Kurenai-san more than other women. She was more sensitive and never did things to make him unsettled, at least not on purpose. "There's nothing to be ashamed about, Naruto-kun. Now scoot a little closer to me." Naruto scowled and tried to pull away, but the older kunoichi kept a strong grip about his en. He could outmuscle the smaller woman and escape, to be certain, but didn't care to show her how bothered he was at the moment. Proper shinobi should never reveal their weaknesses. A solid and impervious veneer was to be maintained at all times. Keep this up and I'll have to introduce you to the QB during his rut, Anko-chan. Naruto's quip was answered with a loud crashing noise resounding inside his mind. Invoke the demon's name and he shall answer the call. The blonde's original master was not pleased with being brought into a trivial moral argument. Such was beneath QB. I do not rut, you miserable cretin. Maybe not, but she doesn't have to know that. Though she might like it in any case. The Ninetales snorted in righteous indignation, opening his massive yap to respond. As though QB no Kitsune would ever taint his loins with a human girl. Naruto wasn't too inclined to argue, annoyed as he was with his psychotic sensei. She's a girl, yes. Or a woman, at least. The human part is a bit more debatable. An audible cough in the threshold brought Naruto back to the conscious world. His head whipped around, causing his end to wrench in Anko's less than gentle grasp. Sarutobi had returned, having shed his traditional Hokage hat and robes and donned a simple white hakama and slippers. He leaned on his cane in one ancient hand and carried both a bound black scroll and a sealed dossier in the other. Whenever you two are done propositioning one another, perhaps we could get started. Naruto turned crimson due to sheer humiliation, which Anko seemed to treat with some twisted delight. The Sandaime seemed to more or less be regarding the scene with amusement. The demon vessel knew that the old man had a pronounced H side, but this was ridiculous. The pineapple-haired kunoichi purred in response as she sidled into her embarrassed and most unwilling pupil's side. I've been letting him know how much I've missed seeing him these last couple weeks. Sarutobi almost went into a nosebleed but regained his composure, and his gaze hardened. That'll be enough now, Anko. We have business to attend to here. Stop teasing the lad. She pouted but let him go, smart enough not to ignore the Hokage's command. Naruto sent the old Kage an appreciative glance, though he was a bit peeved at having his situation pitied. To the irritable blonde genin, that was even worse than being messed with. Cold blue spheres glared in Mitarashi Anko's direction and then leveled on Sarutobi as the Jinchuriki nodded his thanks. The woman in question didn't seem bothered at all. Yeah, whatever, Hokage-sama. Let's get down to this important business then. The Sandaime handed Naruto the black scroll as he took a seat in an armchair, urging him with a nod to open and read its contents. The blonde did so, quashing his irritation with Anko peering over his shoulder without shame. His eyes widened at the header. Ansatsu Senjutsu Tokashu Butai, which also represented. Naruto looked back at the Hokage with a quizzical expression. This is an Anbu commission, Hokage-sama. I'm not even a chunin. Sandaime ignored the weak argument as he loaded his pipe. Even Anko was rendered speechless. Naruto estimated his current SK level as being equivalent to perhaps a high-level chunin despite his meager genin rank. Still, Anbu were the creme de la creme among Konoha's shinobi and specialized in assassinations and other covert ops, and Uzumaki Naruto was anything but discreet in his dealings. The demon container wasn't convinced that he was prepared to take this huge next step, but there seemed to be little choice. He would not disdain the Hokage's wishes and decline the promotion. Naruto had sworn to the man that he would never do anything less than he was able. Sarutobi had taken it as the truth and here was the evidence to support it. You ought to have been one long ago. There is no logic in having a talented shinobi languishing on a rookie squad with a war looming. Naruto sat still and digested this shocking development. He somewhat regretted that he'd be leaving his comrades on Team Kurenai behind, even though he had always known that such would happen sooner than later. Right when the team had started to gel together, this news comes along. But even as that door slammed shut, another opened in its place. This new position was what Naruto had so long envisioned doing, serving in the Hokage's elite personal guard and doing missions under Sarutobi's direct command. Understood. But I don't see the reasoning behind keeping me on a genin team. Take a moment and look over this dossier and I think everything will become clearer. Naruto blinked and took the dossier, breaking the seal and perusing the contents within. He took a small swipe at Anko when she tried to peek, though not in a serious manner. She snarled and brained him with her kunai's blunt ringed end in response, and he didn't even attempt to make her stop peeping again. There were 3 pictures within, as well as intel reports on those photographed. One was a thick-set hooded kid with purple paint who was listed as being a puppet user. Sabaku no Kankuro. The second was an attractive though severe-looking blonde kunoichi, the eldest among the three. Not much about her, other than that she used a tesson in combat and specialized in wind techniques. Sabaku no Temari. All three were listed as being Suna genin. The remaining genin had the most detailed report. Sabaku no Gaara, the youngest among the three siblings, was Naruto's age and had deep crimson hair with piercing aquamarine eyes that were ringed in black. The demon carrier surmised that this was no decorative touch. The kid looked as though he hadn't slept a wink in a decade. He was gaunt and bereaved and appeared more than a little deranged. He had a tattoo over his brow, the character representing love. Odd that. The report went on to mention other things, including that this Gaara person had never even been scratched during a mission and that even his own Kage viewed him as a serious threat to Suna and had attempted to have him assassinated on countless occasions, all to no avail whatsoever. And he was the Kazekige's own son. Everything made sense as the Sandaime had prophesied. Naruto knew his mission as well as the reason he was to remain on Team 8 through the exams. You're ordering me to assassinate the Kazekige's children during the Chunin exams. Sarutobi gave an approving smile as he smoked his pipe, pleased with his understanding. That's correct. Those three can't be harmed outside the trials, lest we as hosts stain our village's reputation and bring great dishonor down onto our heads. Having all three heirs killed during the Chunin exams will disrupt the Kazekige succession and throw the hidden sand into political chaos. Your unique position as an advanced genin makes you the ideal choice to execute this mission without attracting unwanted suspicion, Naruto. You will enter into the exams masquerading as a rookie candidate and exterminate the targets as chances permit, as well as coordinate with the examiners on the inside to help keep things running smooth all around. We'll have to remain on our guard in case our main opponent tries to make trouble during the actual tests. This was a dangerous gambit the old man was proposing. For his part, Naruto would no doubt be marked K on sight in the hidden sand and thereabouts should his role as the assassin come to light. On Sarutobi's end, a miscarriage would result in all-out war with Suna and might rekindle a continent-wide struggle similar to the Great Shinobi Wars. The opponent the old man mentioned was no doubt Orochimaru, who added a whole other dimension to this huge mess. There was no need to promote me to do this. Your promotion won't be announced until the exams are done with, so you can view your mission as your Anbu initiation trial. 4 months remain until the Chunin exams are scheduled to begin, and I want you to redouble your training to prepare. There's another reason I've assigned this task to you in particular. There's something extremely critical concerning Sabaku no Gaara that isn't in the written intelligence. He is like you, Naruto. The Kazekige's youngest son is also the host to Ichibi no Tanuki. The QB perked up considerably inside Naruto's mind when Sandaime revealed that not-so-little detail. Anko sucked in a breath. Another demon container, then. Even at seeing his photo, the blonde had suspected that there was something unnatural about Gaara. Biju were not to be controlled by humans. Their power was too great. The Kazekige had made a grave error in instilling that thing into his son, an error that it would now be Naruto's mission to make right. The blonde thought that it would be wiser to let Gaara snap and obliterate the hidden sand on his own, but it wasn't his place to doubt or question the Hokage's decisions. So, use one demon to annihilate another. This won't be a boring assignment, at least. The demon was not pleased with this revelation, roaring out that he would never be used as a tool to do Konoha's bidding. Despite that, Naruto knew that the Ninetales was at least somewhat eager to do battle against another Biju and shed the Ichibi's blood. Still, this was a precarious position to the blonde, as he was now outright torn between his two masters. This would have to be reconciled somehow. Sarutobi's steward came in with tea and poured 3 glasses. Naruto noted that this was a much tastier blend than the bitter brew that the Hokage served in his business quarters. I'm glad you see it like that. Gaara will be your principal target. Suna is now to be viewed as a hostile village and we cannot allow him to continue keeping a tailed demon under their command. I'd like you to get the other 2 siblings as well, but they are accessories to the main. Sabaku no Gaara must be neutralized above all else. Naruto wondered whether or not Akatsuki's shared intel had even been validated, but decided that it wasn't his business to ask. He had his orders and that was all that mattered. Whatever political repercussions that resulted with the Sandaime's issue, not his. He stood and saluted his cage. Right. Leave it to me. The Hokage nodded his acknowledgement. Good. Now let's get down to the particulars. The operation will take place. The Hokage went on to describe the examination tasks in detail. There would be 3. The initial exam would have ANBU's T, an interrogation specialist, as the lead proctor, and was an intel gathering test disguised as a written exam. Naruto would be given the answers to the test in advance, as he wasn't to be an actual candidate. Anko was to monitor the second exam, a sheer survival test to be held in the hellish training ground 66. The woman let out a dangerous smile when her assigned role was mentioned. Each Genin team would be given either a Heaven Scroll or an Earth Scroll at the exam's onset and would have to complete the set through combat with another team and bring both to the tower in the exam location's center within a set time limit. Naruto would be handed both scrolls in secret, and the one given to Team 8 in public would be an extra bargaining chip in case things got heated inside the woods. This would also give the Mutt and Yamanaka an inequitable advantage in the second exam, but the detail didn't much concern Sarutobi. At last, the third test would be a single combat tournament. The best way would be to get at them during the survival portion where anything goes. Anko at last spoke out again, having spent the last several minutes pondering something. Naruto thought that her conclusion was mere common sense, though he didn't utter the thought aloud. The survival portion was indeed that, the exam where King Other Shinobi was condoned and expected, though perhaps not outright encouraged. That would also be the place where the blonde would be most able to conduct his mission without being seen or reported. Sarutobi burned out his tobacco as he rose to leave. I've arranged to have both the training center and scroll collection here open to you. There will also be a guest bedroom prepared upstairs. Use this house as you like until the exams begin. Anko will now begin instructing you in more advanced techniques as well. I expect you to be prepared to do what needs to be done. I'll be lightening your team's mission load over the coming months so that you can dedicate more time to training. Naruto raised an eyebrow. That was a most generous proposal. Having both unrestricted access to the largest and most extensive scroll collection in the village as well as a set place to learn and practice with the knowledge in private guaranteed that he'd be able to make optimal progress over the next several months. No more need to skulk around in the woods to train or beg new scrolls. Naruto would need all this saved time to be able to make the Anbu standard during the allotted span. In that case, I'd like to head back over to my apartment and gather some things. Sandaime waved his aged hand in a dismissive gesture. Go ahead, we're through here. I'll be going back to the tower in a moment as well. The demon carrier rose and departed, leaving his cage and sensei behind in his enthusiasm to get his things and return to get to work with his new resources. Hearing Anko's voice when he was a decent ways down the hall gave him pause, though. I don't like this idea, Hokage-sama. I mean, teaching the kid those techniques. Naruto moved closer to eavesdrop, as this discussion seemed to concern him. I well know the dangers, Anko. I don't want the boy to turn into another Orochimaru either, but his knowing these SKS might prove to be pivotal later. We can't ignore the likelihood that the two might come into contact somehow during the exams. A power like Naruto's will attract your old sensei's attention, there can be no doubt. Better to educate and prepare him now so he'll be able to cope. Naruto couldn't see her, but Anko sounded serious with her next request. Then I want to be reassigned to Anbu with him, sir. Whatever happens, I'll be around. That snake bastard won't sink his hooks into him. I won't let him. I'm not gonna stand around and watch another one leave me behind. I can't go through that again. Sandaime's response was laced with anger, a genuine rare emotion with the old sage. Have a little trust in the lad, Mitarashi. He's loyal and he won't throw in with that man. So the great serpent might come seeking him out. How interesting. Naruto chose to leave lest his continued presence be discovered. This new development gave him several matters to ponder. He would settle with Orochimaru when the occasion arose. One thing was certain at least. The blonde would not turn against his cage. He would prove to Mitarashi, Anko and anybody else that he wasn't anything like the diabolical Snake Sannin. He walked back towards his modest apartment with a rare purpose, stopping only a second to grab his Zanbatsu as he went. XXXXXXXXXX. 4 months passed at what seemed to be a record pace and the Chunin exams were set to begin in less than 2 days. Naruto was now much stronger and sharper than he'd ever been and was armed with several lethal new techniques. Some SKS were learned through the Hokage's scroll collection and others were the demon container's own inventions. Anko had made good on Sandaim's orders and instructed him in some restricted techniques that she'd gained during her apprenticeship under Orochimaru several years ago, though she remained reluctant to do so and tended to avoid bonding with her student outside training. Naruto supposed that she didn't want to become too attached, but couldn't quite comprehend the reason behind her avoidance. He wasn't too bothered with it, acclimated as he was to living alone. The blonde had also increased the weighting in his coat once the previous load had become simple to move with and still sparred with Tenten one long morning each week to keep his instincts honed. The blonde shinobi hadn't told his teammates or Kurenai-san about his Anbu commission. Sarutobi's orders had implied that he was to keep the promotion a secret in order to maintain the illusion that he belonged in the Chunin exams, and he didn't want to spoil his last remaining months on Team 8 with the news besides. Not that the team had done all that much together since their win over Team Kakashi. There had been some isolated missions and training twice each week, but all three became engrossed in their own respective training programs ever since the exams were announced 2 months ago. Naruto hadn't been keeping much track over the others due to being too occupied with his own exhaustive regimen, but had gathered that Kiba had been spending more time working with the Inuzuka style at his own compound and Ino had started studying as much as possible with her dad and had also been taken under Kurenai-san's proverbial wing. The demon carrier had done what he could to assist the other two during their team practice sessions, but that hadn't amounted to as much as he would have wanted. Hey, leave the girl alone. We can't go around causing trouble here, Kankuro. Naruto's attention spiked at hearing that name. The undeclared Anbu had completed his light morning workout moments ago and had elected to venture outside and take an early lunch at Ichiraku's rather than eat at Sarutobi's house. During the recent months there had been times where he had spent whole days on end cooped up inside the walled compound and training non-stop, with nobody save the steward and Anko on occasion around. The blonde wandered around the corner and saw two unmistakable characters standing in the road towering over a small girl with long hair. Kankuro and Temari, the Suna siblings now in Konoha to participate in the Chunin exams. Forget it, Temari. Little B acts like she can stand there and make us go around her. The Suna Kunoiki shook her head in exasperation, crossing her arms and leaning against the wall surrounding Sandaim's home. Sabaku no Temari looked much like the picture Naruto had seen months earlier, with her Tessen in a case strapped to her back. The demon carrier was standing behind them peering around a corner. Neither noticed his presence though the blonde still got the vibe that he was being observed. Look, get us thrown out of the exams and he'll KU, whatever, it's on your head. Kankuro shrugged and raised his hands. Naruto was now able to view the girl that the two Sand Genin were trying to intimidate and concluded that they were most stupid to do so. She was a Hyuga, the living doormat's younger sister and thus an heiress to the main house. Kumogakure had almost been obliterated due to messing around with that clan. Naruto had seen the girl a couple times around the village, though he thought it peculiar that she was outside her compound without an escort. The Hyuga stared at the two Sand Nins with a superior expression, not yielding so much as an inch. No big deal, all I'm doing here is teaching some respect. Brat thinks she's too good to even talk to us, acting all like you and me are beneath her or something. We can't sit here and ignore being insulted like that. We'd be dishonoring the Sand otherwise. Naruto didn't give a damn about the little Hyuga, but decided to intervene so that he could better assess his two prospective targets. He couldn't move against them now, but despite knowing this his hand twitched towards his sheathed katana in anticipation. That's because you two Sand rats are beneath her. I'd suggest you both take a hike. The blonde stepped out into the open and stood in the narrow street. Kankuro turned around with a bitter scowl. Temari glanced at the Konoha shinobi without expression. She seemed to be less than willing to start something in the streets. Well, at least one among them had some common sense. Look at this, sis. We've got ourselves a wannabe samurai here. Doesn't look the part. The S-eyed Naruto in his black armor and trench coat with his massive cleaver strapped to his back looked more like some hellspawn devil than a noble protector. He had to concede the point. Not that it mattered. He was trying to neither rescue the damsel nor look like the hero. TCH, don't be ridiculous. A main house Hyuga wouldn't need help taking out a loser like you. Naruto was telling the truth. and the girl became a little smug on hearing it said. Kankuro was a puppet user who relied on chakra strings to manipulate his little dolls. Strings that the Byakugan made quite visible and simple to cut. Any decent Hyuga could take out this desert trash with ease, main house or branch house. Yeah, well, we'll have to see about that. Maybe this'll be a good practice beating. Kankuro smirked as he dropped the bundle strapped to his back, a wrapped package that appeared to contain his battle puppet. The painted Suna Shinobi leered at Naruto as though preparing to attack him rather than the girl. Temari watched the developing situation with unease, and the Hyuga looked a little peeved about now being ignored. The Sand Genin let out some king intent as he started to unravel the bandages. So that's your cur instinct, kinda pathetic. Here, let me show you how it's done. Naruto's king intent overrode Kankuro's with ease, pinning both him and his older sister in place. The pair could break out soon enough, the blonde imagined, but yet not soon enough in the puppeteer's case. The demon carrier closed in with a speed he wouldn't have been able to achieve while wearing his weighted coat several months prior and kneed the Suna Genin in the stomach while running. Kankuro was driven back a good distance and sank to his knees clutching at his stomach. The blonde closed in again and delivered a rising backhand punch that sent the heavyset Kankuro sailing through the air and crashing in a heap on the pavement. Temari blinked and Naruto let out his king intent again, this time with much more power than the last. The second burst was more than enough to get the Kunoichi's undivided attention. The eldest Sand sibling glared hard in her reeling brother's direction as soon as Naruto's king intent dissipated. Great, look at what you've stirred up now. Idiot. That king intent, he might be as strong as. That's enough, you two. You're both an embarrassment to our village. A dangerous voice spoke out in the near distance as Kankuro regained his bearings and Temari made to retrieve her unique weapon and attempt to help her overmatched brother. Naruto sensed a strong presence in a tree overlooking the Sarutobi estate's grounds and turned to see on Sabaku no Gaara suspended upside down on a limb with a huge gourd strapped onto his back. Somehow the Ichibi carrier had managed to repress his chakra and remain concealed until choosing to reveal his presence. Kankuro and Temari both paled and began making stuttered excuses, abandoning all intention to press an attack on Naruto in an instant. The puppet user's voice was slurred due to a swelling cheek. Gee Gaara. Hey now, little bro, why you saw what happened? He attacked me, not. The insomniac redhead wasn't in the least impressed with his older sibling's sniveling. Gaara disappeared in swirling sand and reappeared on the ground between Naruto and the other two Suna Genin. Shut your worthless mouths, or else I'll kill you both right now. He was oozing his own king intent now, laced with demonic chakra as well as his own. Kankuro and Temari were both rendered helpless and even Naruto shuddered a little at the power being radiated. Gaara was as strong as the spiky blonde, perhaps even more so. Even with all his extra training, victory over the other demon carrier could not be assured when the two would soon clash. The crimson-haired psychopath ceased his assault once his point had been made and looked over his shoulder to regard Naruto and the Hyuga. Sorry to you both. These two won't be causing any more trouble here. We're leaving. Kankuro hurried over to gather his bandaged puppet in his arms and withdrew, not being the least bit willing to argue with the angered Gaara. The Ichibi container stalked away along the narrow road as well, though at a much more deliberate pace. Temari took the rear, but stopped a moment to turn back around and send a last lingering glance at the tall armored shinobi who had dispatched her brother with practiced ease. That was impressive. Catch you around later then, handsome. Naruto's cold blue eyes narrowed in disdain as Temari smirked and went to rendezvous with her two brothers, waving over her shoulder as she departed. Flirting with him like that as though she and the other Suna shinobi weren't planning to invade the village. He'd see how handsome she thought him when he plunged his icy steel through her heart. The blonde exhaled a breath he wasn't even aware he'd been holding when the gourd covering Gaara's back disappeared over a hill. So that was the Ichibi. He's stronger than I had imagined. Naruto leaned back against the compound wall and closed his eyes as he made the usual descent into his subconscious mind. Now was the time to discuss this demon's sighting with the mightiest yokai around. The kitsune seemed to be mulling over the events as well when the host appeared at his cage. It was Shukaku, no question. I could smell that raccoon's taint all over that desert brat. Shukaku, Naruto hadn't heard that name, but assumed the demon meant the Ichibi. Gaara seems to be able to exert much more control over his powers than what we can. The demon shook his massive head in the negative, baring his canines in a superior grin. Very much the opposite, I think. Whoever stuck that raccoon into him did some shoddy work. The seal is much weaker than the fourths. The brat's essence and Shukaku's look to be battling against each other, each consciousness striving to control the husk. This Gaara holds no sway over Shukaku at all. Naruto sneered in his mind at the poor kid's plight. He'd be liberated soon enough. Well, that's too bad. He didn't seem to notice you, at least. I've been keeping my presence concealed. The moment to settle with him hasn't yet come. But it's not long in coming. I can hardly wait to watch you obliterate him. The blonde sensed a penetrating stare targeted at him on the outside and returned back to the conscious world. Annoyed with having his conversation interrupted, he looked hard at the sole person present. The little Hyuga heiress had her arms crossed and was staring at him with a cold expression, like a warlord expecting tribute. I should hope you aren't waiting to be thanked. I neither wanted nor needed assistance. Deep down Naruto was somewhat impressed with her. Grown adults cringed in horror at his presence, and here was this little 7-year-old girl staring him down with those white eyes showing no hesitation. Not surprising, as she had also gotten into something with Kankuro and Temari and hadn't backed down then either. The kid had some spunk, he'd give her that much. Telling her so on the other hand, he would not. Naruto glanced at the audacious little princess, blinking his eyes in mock puzzlement. I hadn't thought about you at all. Forgot that you were even there, to be honest. With that dismissive comment, the demon vessel strode away into the street and started again towards his original destination. The Hyuga girl's indignant glare didn't cease burning into his back until he was long gone down the road. XXXXXXXXXX. The Chunin exams had arrived at last. Naruto walked towards the Genin Academy with his two teammates trailing a step behind. He was garbed to work, his weighted coat and cleaver stored inside two scrolls that were attached to the black sash at his waist. He wore his crimson bodysuit and light armor with his katana at his waist and dual ninjato at his wrists, also sporting his old Konoha Haitai 8 as the exam rules mandated. Kiba looked much the same as usual, except that Akamaru had grown somewhat during the last several months. Yamanaka had trimmed her hair to about shoulder length, at last getting that point. This thing says we're supposed to report to room 301. So we go upstairs, I guess. Naruto grinned and rolled his eyes. The obvious was Kiba's principal domain. Don't know how we'd ever get along without those superb analytical SKS, mutt. Yamanaka choked out a giggle while the team leader allowed Kiba to take the lead as Team 8 entered the building. Some other candidates were gathered as well, most among whom were Konoha Genin. The host village always tended to have the most examinees whenever these little exams came around. The trio reached the building's second level. Ino raised a well-sculpted eyebrow upon seeing the sign on the wall. Naruto also saw through the illusion at once. Basic common sense, this was the second level and not the third. The Yamanaka leaned into the demon container and whispered into his ear. That has got to be the crappiest genjutsu I've ever seen, hands down. Naruto stared at the two Chunin guarding the room. That was in truth the stairs leading to the third level. No rush to get through, and the blonde decided not to take the initiative so as not to draw too much attention. He was at these exams on a mission and pointless posturing would be nothing but detrimental. He'd at least give the others a chance to see past the smokescreen. So you've seen through it as well, then. Kinda laughable that these other teams haven't. Not to mention dog breath over there. I mean, we even train with an illusion specialist. Kiba was indeed demanding to be let into the room, alongside some other candidates. Akamaru yipped along with his trainer. Naruto didn't see any point in enlightening the Inuzuka and leaned back against the wall with a sigh. This was going to be a long week. He supposed that he should embrace this as the last mission he would ever conduct alongside his current teammates, but all he could think about was the task set to him. Assassinating the Ichibi and his container wouldn't be simple, and there was still the Orochimaru issue to consider as well. He hoped that Sarutobi had miscalculated this once and that the Sannin would leave Naruto and his team alone, or even better not deign to make a personal appearance period. Gaara and his siblings would be trouble enough considering that the blonde also needed to keep his teammates alive. Ohio, Uzumaki-kun. I see your team's gotten here early too. The QB's living container glanced back at the staircase leading back down to the ground level where Team Guy had arrived and were heading towards the gathered crowd. That would, indeed, seem to be the case, Tenten. Either that or you're all late. The weapons user blinked and then gave her tall, sometimes sparring partner a light-hearted punch to the bicep. Well, light-hearted in a relative manner at the least. The smack still hurt a little bit. Yamanaka narrowed her eyes a little at this exchange, which somewhat puzzled the demon carrier. He would never comprehend girls, it seemed. Oh, come on. That retort wasn't even near your usual standards. You can do better. Whatever desire Naruto might have had to get his own back in the mounting verbal contest was derailed when another person entered into the conversation. Yet another encounter with the Hyuga, it would seem. Tenten's pearl-eyed teammate strode over and stood opposite the blonde, his countenance showing nothing as usual. I remember observing you during that exhibition match. Tell me your name. Typical Hyuga, demanding rather than asking. Tenten averted her eyes when the other genin made his appearance, indicating that she hadn't told her teammates much about their extra training sessions. Or perhaps she had, and doing so had sparked the Hyuga's interest and there was some guilt involved. There's no need to tell you anything, but whatever. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. You seem a little old to be a rookie, yet here you are on a team with them. The other genin's tone was conversational, indicating no malice or derision. Naruto chose not to respond to the pointless comment regardless, as he had neither an acceptable explanation he could give pertaining to his advanced growth, nor an actual obligation to give one at all. Well, I eat my vegetables and take my vitamins. Now it's your turn to give your name. Hyuga Neji. Your triumph over the Uchiha and his team was quite remarkable. I chose to attend that match to observe him in particular, so I must admit that I was rather surprised to see him lose in such a convincing manner to an unknown rookie. Naruto blinked in surprise. The Kyuubi vessel was anything but unknown around Konoha. Still, the Hyuga tended to be a rather isolated lot in general, considering themselves above common people, and it was very possible that this Neji didn't know anything about him. Reputation isn't everything. Shinobi aren't supposed to draw attention to themselves. Neji's brow creased, indicating that he didn't quite agree. For Naruto's part, he knew that he was being a bit hypocritical, having done several things to increase his renown and embraced doing countless more. Somewhat, but he wasn't a total hypocrite. He wanted a reputation carved through his enemy's blood and not one given through his own. Perhaps, there is some logic in that. You intrigue me, Uzumaki Naruto. I hope that we will have chance to cross paths during the exams. I am eager to see how my own SKS would rate against. A loud protest cut the Hyuga's comment short. Caterpillar brows had arrived. IIE, Neji-kun. I am the one who must challenge him. I shall avenge Sakura-chan. Tenten groaned and Neji's eyes narrowed in annoyance. Ino snorted in disgust when Guy's apprentice revealed his motive, not even considering it worth responding to. This kid was serious. He wanted to throw down right then and there. Naruto was becoming rather irritated with the situation, closing his eyes with a scowl. These imbeciles had no right challenging him to battle, when his hands were so drenched in blood and he could count those who had stood opposite him and lived to tell on his hands. Anko-sensei and Kiba, Kankuro and Temari and Kakashi's team. And among those living opponents none had been a serious battle. Every single person that the demon carrier had ever approached with the intent to kill was and rotting. These children had never partaken in a true mortal combat. At least Sasuke had seen and experienced death and somewhat understood. When the blonde replied, his clipped tone was as cold as ice. Conserve your strength, Gaki. You'll need it to get through the exams in one piece. Naruto strode over to the two Chunin guards with a purpose. Ino glanced at the sputtering green-clad idiot as well as the worried Tenten and contemplative Neji and then went with her teammate. Kiba saw them and attached to the group as well. The demon carrier knew that there was no initial barrier scheduled and that these two were acting without orders and trying to be assholes and pick on the genin. Naruto-kun, I'm sure he didn't mean to. The spiky blonde ignored his kunoiki teammate, having something else on his mind. These two were in luck that it would be him stopping their little charade. Someone like Sabaku no Gara might have killed him outright. Drop this genjutsu and let us through. You two aren't authorized to impede the exams. The two Chunin glanced at one another and nodded, dropping the illusion and standing aside. Naruto had somewhat expected to have to put him down to get through, but the insinuation that he was aware that the pair were acting without orders and were tampering with the test seemed to be enough to make them relent. With several other shinobi villages involved, their actions could well be construed as being treasonous should he report them to an examiner or the Hokage. Thank you very much, we were all getting rather bored with waiting around here. A hidden grass kunoiki drd her hand along Naruto's shoulder as she passed with her team, whispering the thanks into his ear. The blonde's honed instincts pricked as she passed. Something wasn't at all right or natural about her. Her eyes contained something sinister. Kasagaku's shinobi had a rather notorious reputation as being cruel and barbaric curs, so Naruto thought that perhaps that was what had caused his senses to react thus. So there was a genjutsu, I thought something wasn't right back there the whole time. This time, it was Ino who took the opening to abuse Kiba. Stop trying to lie, Kibblehead, you were tricked like everybody else in the room. The mutt then made what seemed to be his automated response to being insulted. F you, Naruto. The blonde in question was more occupied with glancing back at the stairs, where Gaara and his squad had arrived on the scene. The Ichibi container noticed his look and returned his stare with narrowed eyes. Temari tossed out that insincere smirk and waved at him again while Kankuro glowered. Naruto turned his attention back to Kiba as Team Kurenai moved up to the building's third level and turned into an unoccupied corridor. Wasn't me this time, mongrel. Be a little more attentive. Well, it seems that you're all in high spirits this morning. I'm glad you're all here. Kiba smirked at Kurenai, who stood in the hall leading into the waiting room. Damn straight, Kurenai-sensei. We weren't gonna miss out on a chance like this. That's right, I'll use everything you've taught me to get through. Yamanaka smiled as she and the mutt walked past into the waiting area. Kurenai watched as her two students departed, while Naruto was somewhat torn between watching them and observing her. He hesitated a moment and then made to leave as well. Wait a moment, Naruto-kun. I need to tell you something. I understand, Kurenai-san. I'll make sure to protect the others through the exams. The blonde stopped walking and turned around as the woman approached him. She averted her red eyes a moment and then turned back to lock him in her gaze. Yes, guarding your teammates is important, but I wanted to wish you luck as well. Thank you, but I'll be alright. I can handle something like this with ease, you'll see. He wasn't as assured in his heart as he said, but there was nothing that could be done now. Naruto had his mission and would complete it, no matter what the cost would be. Failure was not an option. The Hokage had placed his trust in the blonde to get this task done. In another situation he would sneer at an abstract idea like luck, but decided that he might even need it this time. I'm having a very bad premonition about these exams, Naruto-kun. Something terrible is going to happen and I don't want you or the others to get caught in it. Call it woman's intuition. Promise me you'll do everything in your power to avoid trouble out there. Naruto wondered whether the instructors had been told about the looming invasion and Kurenai was trying to warn him against the threat or this was indeed her personal intuition talking. Either way, his mission would have him seeking trouble. The blonde wouldn't make a promise that he wasn't willing to keep, especially not to her. Never to her. At the least, she deserved to know the reason why. I can't do that. With what I've been asked to do, I can't guarantee anything. Those red eyes seemed to both question and accuse Naruto at the same time. I don't quite understand what you mean by, asked to do. The demon carrier turned away and ran a hand through his spiked locks. The pressure surrounding his situation was becoming tough to bear. Naruto had never accepted a mission like this, with so much on the line. The battle against Zabuza and Haku had been an impromptu thing, with no time to turn it over in his mind. And then there had been no lives at risk other than his own and his enemies. Now he had two teammates, comrades who he might acknowledge as being precious people, as much as he hated the cliché, to protect. And he had both a psychotic demon container Takei and perhaps the single most dangerous criminal in all the 5 shinobi countries pursuing him, at least according to what Sarutobi had prophesied. This was what it meant to be shinobi, something that the blonde hadn't understood on its whole essence until now, as much as he liked to espouse the principles. No wonder he had almost gone neurotic on Guy's apprentice moments ago. Ask Anko-sensei or the Sandaime. I've been ordered not to tell, but I think you have the right to know. Please don't ask me to go against Hokage-sama's orders more than I have here. I'll promise you this much though, nothing bad will happen to Kiba and Ino during the exams. I'll watch over them both with everything I have, so no worries. Naruto departed with that comment. He didn't want to think about what might happen much longer. Making his promise to Kurenai made things seem a bit clearer at least. His two teammates would make it through the exams alive and in good health. The blonde hadn't been able to help the growth like he had hoped, but he could do this. He would blaze their path to advancement and secure his own position as the Hokage's most trusted. Naruto took a breath and then walked into the waiting room to stand with his squad. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.